The brochures came out before my coffee did. It was a Tuesday in February, in the corner booth at Danner's, the diner where I have taken my morning coffee for going on 40 years. My son Greg sat across from me in a pressed shirt, and he fanned 3 glossy pamphlets across the table like a man dealing cards he already knew would win. Cedar Ridge Senior Living, Maple Grove Assisted Care. A third one with a photograph of a smiling gray couple on a porch that was not their porch. "You can't keep rattling around in that big house alone, Dad," he said. "It isn't safe." He said it kindly. That is the part I keep coming back to. He said it the way you would tell a child the stove is hot. I set my hand on the table. I did not pick up a brochure. "A room opens on the 15th of next month," he went on. "I put a deposit down so we wouldn't lose it. Good ones fill up fast." A deposit. Already paid. I had not been asked. I had been scheduled. I looked at the cream swirling in my coffee, and I nodded slow. The way you nod when your hearing is fine, and your heart is the thing that has gone quiet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to a house that did not exist yet. I'm Lyle Mercer, 68 years old, retired electrician, widower. I live outside Halstead in southern Indiana, in a house that started as a stack of lumber and a woman who believed me. The town sees an old man with a green pickup and a workshop full of tools he does not need anymore. They see me at Danner's on Tuesdays, at the hardware store on Saturdays, at the second pew on the left on Sundays. They see a quiet fellow who waves and does not say much. That is all they see. I have never minded. A man who talks little gets to keep most of what he knows. What they do not see is the house. Not the way I see it. We built it ourselves, Vivian and I. Not a contractor, not a crew. Us. In the summers of 1984, 1985, and 1986, on 2 acres my father-in-law let us have for $1 and a handshake, we raised a house board by board with our own hands. I was a young electrician at the county co-op then, pulling wire all week and swinging a hammer all weekend. Viv held the other end of every tape measure I ever stretched. She was not a woman who watched. She was a woman who worked. She learned to set a nail in 2 strikes. She could read my string lines better than the boys I hired on later at the plant. When we poured the concrete for the back step, on a hot August evening in 1985, she knelt down before it set and pressed her right hand flat into the wet gray of it. "Viv," I said, "what are you doing to my step?" "So the house remembers us," she said, "even when we forget ourselves." That handprint is still there. 41 years later, on the back step, 5 small fingers and a palm pressed into concrete that has gone hard as a county road. I have run my thumb along it 10,000 times. I know its edges the way I know my own name. The building of that house was not easy, and I would not trade a single hard day of it. The first summer, we got the frame up, and a storm came through in September and took half the roof sheathing into the next county. Viv stood in the rain and looked at it and did not cry. She said, "Well, we know it comes apart. Now we'll build it so it doesn't." And we did. I wired the whole place myself at night after my shifts, running circuits by the light of a lantern, and Viv sat on an overturned bucket and handed me wire nuts and kept me company, and told me when I was cussing too much for a man in a house of God's making. We had almost no money. We had a lot of evenings. It turns out evenings are the thing you actually build a house out of. We moved in before it was finished. We lived 2 winters with bare drywall in the back rooms and a wood stove that ate everything we fed it. Ellen learned to walk on a plywood subfloor. When I finally hung the front door, on a Saturday in the fall of 1986, on hinges I set with my own level, Viv put her hand on the frame and said, "There. Now it's ours all the way through." A house you build yourself is not a purchase. It is a marriage you can walk around inside of. Inside, on the pantry door frame, there are pencil marks. Ellen at 4, Greg at 3, Ellen at 7, standing very straight to beat her own record. A ladder of little lines climbing the wood, each with a name and a year in Viv's careful hand. We built it board by board. Nobody handed it to us. That matters later. Vivian died in the spring of 2023. Her heart, the doctors said, though I could have told them her heart was the strongest thing in that house. She went in the night quietly, the way she did everything. I woke up next to a woman who was already gone, in the house we had built to grow old in, and I learned that a house can hold you up and break your heart in the very same wall. I was 66. I made the coffee for one. I have made the coffee for one every morning since. For a while, my son was good to me. I want to say that plainly, because what came after does not erase it. In the first weeks, Greg came by most evenings. He cut the grass. He sat with me. He is my boy, 41 years old, and there was a stretch there where grief made us close in a way we had not been in years. Then the closeness changed shape. It started with the checkbook. Greg noticed I had paid the propane bill twice one month, which was true, and it was the kind of thing Viv used to catch and I did not. So he offered to help. Then helping became handling. He set up something on his phone that let him watch my accounts. He would call and say, "Dad, you don't need to be driving to the bank, I've got it." And I let him, because it is a strange thing to argue with a son who says he only wants to help. Then it was the truck. Too old, he said, not safe. Then it was the workshop. All those tools, all that current, a fire waiting to happen for a man my age. Then it was the corrections at Sunday dinner, small ones in front of Renee and the baby, little edits to my own stories. That was 91, Dad, not 89. You already told us that one. He forgets, he would say to Renee gently, as if I had left the room. I had not left the room. I have never once left the room. Renee is my daughter-in-law. She is 38, a kind woman with tired eyes, and she married my son 11 years ago, knowing exactly how much work he was and loving him anyway. She would look away when Greg corrected me. Her shoulders would tighten before the joke even landed. I watched her because I have learned that the truth of a room is not in the man who is talking. It is in the face of the woman who has stopped. That's the thing about being managed. It always wears the face of love. Every cut comes wrapped in your own good. And so you cannot fight it without looking like the very thing they are accusing you of, a stubborn old man who will not be helped. At Thanksgiving that last year, I brought my green bean dish, the one Viv taught me, the one I have made for 40 years. Greg took it from my hands at the door before I was all the way inside. I got it, Dad. You go sit. He set it at the far end of the counter behind the store-bought pie, and it never made the table. Nobody ate it. Nobody meant anything cruel by it. That is the thing people do not understand about these cuts. Half of them are not even aimed. They are just what happens when a family decides, without a vote, that you are now a guest in your own life. You go sit. You let them carry the dish. You watch it cool on the counter behind the pie. Later I found the good serving spoon, my mother's spoon, in a box in Greg's garage marked for a rummage sale. He had started clearing my things before he had cleared me. He did not think of it as stealing. He thought of it as tidying up after a man who would not need much where he was going. I took the spoon home. I did not say a word about it, but I remember every man who has ever decided in advance what I would and would not need. So I let it go. I let a lot of things go in those 2 years. For a while, letting go looks like peace. Let me tell you about the boy Greg used to be, because I do not want you to think I am telling you about a monster. I am not. I am telling you about a son. When Greg was 6, he held the drop light for me while I pulled wire through the new addition. 2 whole hours, that little arm up over his head, keeping the light steady on the box so his old man could see. He did not complain once. When I finished, I told him he was the best apprentice I ever had, and he slept in his work clothes that night so he would be ready in the morning. I keep that boy in a drawer in my chest. I take him out sometimes. The night everything turned, I did not raise my voice. I never did. What turned it was not a fight. It was a child. It was a Thursday evening near the end of February, and Nora was at my kitchen table coloring. Nora is my granddaughter. She is 7 years old, all elbows and opinions, with her grandmother's stubborn chin. She had the good markers, the ones I keep in the coffee can for when she comes, and she was drawing a house with a very orange sun. "Grandpa," she said, not looking up, "are you going to live at the place with the big fish tank?" "What place is that, honey?" I said. "The one Daddy showed us. It has a fish tank in the front, and a man plays the piano." She switched to the green marker. "Daddy says when you go live there, me and him can have your house. I get the room with the slanty roof." She smiled up at me then, because to her, it was happy news. A slanty room. A fish tank. Grandpa taken care of. Everyone pleased. I smiled back at her. I have had a lot of practice keeping my face still. I told her the slanty room was a fine choice, and I got her a glass of milk, and I sat back down and let her tell me about the fish. A child cannot lie well enough to hide a plan. She had only repeated one. Later that evening, when Greg came to pick her up, his jacket was slung over the chair by the door, and a corner of paper was showing at the pocket. I am not a man who goes through pockets, but I had heard my own house sold at my own table by a 7-year-old, and so I looked. A realtor's card, Todd Barrow, Barrow and Klein Realty, and folded behind it a receipt, a deposit paid to Maple Grove Assisted Care in November. November. 3 months before he ever showed me a brochure. He had decided in the fall. He had paid in the fall. The diner, the pamphlets, the kind voice about my own good, all of it was theater for a decision already made. I put the card and the receipt back exactly as I found them. I straightened the jacket on the chair. When Greg came through with Nora on his hip, I told him to drive safe, and I meant it, because he was carrying my granddaughter. Then I stood in my kitchen a long time after their taillights were gone. I did not get angry. I got quiet. There is a difference, and my son had forgotten it. Anger is loud and spends itself fast. Quiet keeps. Quiet builds. The next morning I drove out to see Cecil. Cecil Hensley pulled wire beside me for 22 years at the veneer plant. He is 70 now, with hands like old leather in a wood shop out behind his place, where he turns bowls nobody needs and gives them away. There is no man alive I trust more to tell me when I am being a fool. I told him all of it in his shop, over the whine of the lathe, and when I finished, he shut the machine off and the quiet came down like a blanket. "Well," he said, "you could blow the roof off." "I could. You could go to that dinner table and read your boy the riot act in front of his wife and let him know exactly what you think of a man who prices his father's house before the man is cold." He blew sawdust off a bowl. "You'd feel real good for about a day. And then? And then you'd have a son who knows how to fight you." He looked at me. "You don't want to fight, Lyle. You want the thing that actually holds." I stood there in the sawdust smell and I heard Viv, the way I still do, plain as if she were leaning in the doorway. "Don't win the argument, Lyle. Protect the child." She did not mean Greg. She meant Nora. She meant the ground and the handprint and the pencil marks, the whole inheritance that was never about money. "I need a lawyer," I told Cecil. "Not a fight, a lawyer." "You need the right one," he said, and he was correct about that too. Before I left, Cecil put a hand on my shoulder, which is not a thing he does. "I watched them do this to my dad," he said. "Different family, same script. We moved him out of his house for his own good, and he was gone inside a year. Not from the place. From the moving. A man is roots, Lyle. You dig him up, he does not always take again." He squeezed once. "You do the quiet thing. You keep your ground." I drove home the long way, past the church, past the co-op where I started, past the veneer plant where I finished. 31 years of pulling wire so that other people's lights would come on when they flipped a switch, and never once thought about the man who ran the circuit. That is the whole trade. You do the work inside the walls, where no one looks, and the house glows and takes the credit. I did not mind it in the walls. I minded being put out of the house I had wired with my own 2 hands. The right one was Dorothy Keegan. Dorothy is an estate attorney in town, 61 years old, and she was Vivian's friend for 30 years before she was ever mine. She and Viv used to sit on my porch and drink iced tea and solve the county's problems. When Viv got sick, it was Dorothy who quietly helped us put things in order, and I had not thought hard about any of it since, because grief makes a man file the important papers in a drawer and shut it. I sat across from Dorothy's desk on the 1st of March and I laid it out. The deposit paid in the fall, the realtor's card, the child at my table saying the quiet part out loud. Dorothy did not gasp. Lawyers do not gasp. She pulled a folder from a cabinet, and inside it was a document I had signed with Viv years back and mostly forgotten. "Do you remember what we did in 2017? She asked. I remember Viv making me sign a stack of things. "You and Vivian put the house into the Mercer Family Living Trust," she said. "The 2 of you were the trustees. When Vivian passed, you became the sole trustee. The house has not been in your personal name for 9 years, Lyle. It is held in trust. I sat with that. So Greg can't sell it, I said. Greg has no standing to sell anything, she said. He is not on the deed. He is not a trustee. He seems to believe the house is his inheritance, and that moving you out is the same as owning it. It is not. She folded her hands. But there is more we can do than sit on our hands and be right. If you want to make sure this house never becomes a thing your son can spend, we can settle it now, in a way that cannot be undone. That was the first time I understood I had a choice bigger than defending myself. I could decide where the house went. Not in a will read after I am gone, now, on purpose, with my own hand. Tell me how it works, I said. She drew it on a legal pad, plain lines, plain words. We would create a new trust, an irrevocable one, and move the house into it. Irrevocable means what it says. Once it is done, I cannot be talked out of it, and neither can anyone standing over my shoulder with a power of attorney. The house would be held for Nora, my granddaughter. Not to be sold, not to be borrowed against, held. And you, Dorothy said, keep what is called a life estate. Which is? Which means you live in that house until your last day on this earth, and no one, not Greg, not a bank, not a judge, can move you out of it or sell it out from under you. You are home for life. After you, it passes to Nora. Clean. It never touches Greg's hands at all. It cannot be used to cover his debts. And I have a feeling, she said, watching my face, that debts are what this is really about. She was right. I found out how right soon enough. Renee, I said. Can Renee be the one who watches over it? The trustee? Dorothy raised an eyebrow. You trust your son's wife over your son. I trust the person who looks away when he lies, I said. That is a person who knows the difference. Dorothy almost smiled. I always liked you, Lyle. Vivian had good taste in exactly one thing. We set it in motion. Over the next 3 weeks, I came to her office 3 times, and I signed what needed signing, and I read every line out loud in my own voice, because I am nobody's confused old man, and I wanted the record to show a steady hand. While I signed, Greg planned. He did not know I had been to Dorothy's. Why would he? He thought I was folding, the way I had folded on the checkbook in the truck. He grew bolder. He booked movers for the second Saturday of April. He told his aunt and his cousins that it was all arranged, that Dad had finally seen sense. My sister-in-law Carol called me, warm as pie, to tell me how brave I was being and how lucky I was to have a son who cared enough to handle everything. She meant it kindly. She had heard only Greg's version, the one where I was slipping and he was saving me. That is how these things spread through a family. One person tells a story often enough and gently enough, and soon everyone is nodding along to your decline as though it were weather. He came by on a Sunday and started making lists. What would go to the little room at Maple Grove, which was not much, a chair, a lamp, some clothes. What would be sold? What would be dealt with, which was his word for my workshop, 40 years of tools, my father's tools before that. He walked through my house with a phone in his hand, photographing rooms, and he narrated it to me the whole time in that patient voice, and I let him, and I said little, and inside I was as steady as a plumb line. Renee called me once, late, her voice small, and started to say something, and then Greg's voice came near the phone, and she said, "Never mind, she was just checking on me. Good night." I sat with the phone in my hand a while after she hung up. I have raised a daughter. I know the sound of a woman trying to tell you something while a man stands in the doorway. I did not hold it against her. She was carrying a hard thing in a house that did not want to hear it, and she was doing it about as well as a person can. Then one afternoon in the middle of March, I came back from Cecil's, and there was a lockbox on my front door, the kind realtors hang so they can let buyers in. On my door. On the door I hung myself in 1986, on hinges I set with my own level. I stood on my porch and looked at it a long minute. Then I took my cordless drill from the truck, backed out the 2 screws, and set the lockbox on my workbench next to a coffee can of markers. I did not call Greg about it. I did not call the realtor. I signed the last of Dorothy's papers on a Wednesday, and the house went into Nora's trust, recorded at the county the very next morning, and then I let my son keep planning his moving day. Some men would call that a trap. I did not think of it that way. I had told him nothing that was false. I had simply stopped arguing with a decision and started making my own. The gathering came on a Thursday near the end of April. Greg called and said he needed me to come sign just a couple of things so the move would go smooth, and that he had set it up at a lawyer's office to make it official and easy. He did not know the lawyer he had picked, through his realtor, shared a hallway with Dorothy Keegan. He did not know much, my son, in those days. He thought knowing less was the same as being in charge. I put on a clean shirt. I drove myself because I still drive myself. The office was one of those bright places with a long table and a bowl of mince nobody eats. Greg was already there in his pressed shirt with a young lawyer beside him and a stack of documents squared up neat. Renee sat a little apart, her coat still on, her hands in her lap. She looked at me when I came in and then looked at the table. "Dad, thanks for coming," Greg said, standing, doing the firm handshake he learned from a book. "This'll be quick. Just some paperwork so we can get you settled and get the house handled. There's a durable power of attorney here, real standard, lets me take care of the sale and the closing so you don't have to deal with any of the stress. And the listing agreement. Todd's got a buyer already interested, if you can believe it." He slid the power of attorney across the table toward me. Then the listing agreement on top of it, a pen laid across both, angled toward my hand, the way you angle a thing at a man you expect to obey. I did not pick up the pen. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I asked a friend to sit in. I hope that's all right." The door opened, and Dorothy Keegan came in with a folder of her own. Greg's face did a thing I will remember for the rest of my days. It tried to stay pleasant while the ground moved under it. "Dad, we don't really need," he started. "Humor an old man," I said. Dorothy sat. She did not raise her voice. She never does. She laid one document on the table, turned so Greg and his young lawyer could read it, and she put her finger on the top line. "There is nothing here to list, Greg," she said. "The house is held in an irrevocable trust for the benefit of Nora Mercer. Your father holds a life estate. He lives there for the rest of his life, and after that it passes to your daughter. It was recorded at the county on the 9th of April. There is no power of attorney on earth that changes it because your father is not confused and has not been declared anything of the kind. There is no sale. There was never going to be a sale." The young lawyer beside Greg read it, and then read it again, and then set his pen down very gently. The way you set down a tool you have just realized is not yours. Silence. Real silence. The kind that has weight. The bowl of mince. The hum of the lights. My son's breathing. "You put it in Nora's name," Greg said finally. His voice had gone flat. "You went behind me." "I went in front of you," I said. "You just weren't looking." He turned to Renee, and that is when the second thing happened. The thing I did not plan and could not have. Renee stood up. "He didn't go behind anyone, Greg," she said, and her voice shook, but it did not stop. "I've been trying to tell you for 2 months. It was never right. You paid that deposit in November. You told Nora before you told your own father. I couldn't look at him at Sunday dinner anymore. I couldn't." She was crying now, but she stayed standing. "I'm glad he did it. I'm glad somebody protected that house, because you wouldn't listen to me." Greg looked at his wife. He looked at the paper. He looked at me, and there it was, the whole thing, laid bare on a bright table with a bowl of mince between us. No shouting, no security called, no dramatic ending. Only a man realizing the floor was never his to sell, and that the two people at the table he most needed to believe in him already knew everything. I did not gloat. I want you to hear that. I had not come to win. A man does not win against his own son. There is no version of that where you carry the trophy home. I had come to leave. We finished in the parking lot. That is usually where the true conversations happen, out by the trucks, away from the mints. Greg followed me out. His shoulders were down. The pressed shirt did not look like armor anymore. "You made me look like a criminal in there," he said. "No," I said. "You did that in November. I just stopped helping you hide it. Now tell me the real thing, son. Tell me about the money." He was quiet a while. Then it came out of him the way it comes out of a man who has been carrying it alone. The contracting business he started 3 years ago was underwater. He had taken a loan against equipment, then another to cover the first. Then a job had gone bad and a client had not paid, and the whole thing had started to fold. He had done the math 100 nights at his kitchen table, and the only number big enough to fix it was the number my house would bring. I told myself it was for Nora too, he said. College, a cushion. I told myself you'd be safer somewhere with people around. He rubbed his face. I don't even know when I started lying to myself first. Usually that's where it starts, I said. I want to tell you what I felt standing there, because it was not triumph. It was that old ache, the one from when he held the drop light, the one that never really leaves a father. My boy was drowning and had reached for the nearest heavy thing, and the nearest heavy thing was his mother's handprint in a concrete step. Here is what I will do, I said. I will go to the bank with you. I will sit down with them, and we will put together an honest plan to pay what you owe, over time, like men do. If it helps you stand up, I will co-sign a fair one. I have some put by. Not the house, never the house. Not one dime of the ground your mother's hand is in. But I will not watch you go under either. He reached for the folder in my hand, the one with Dorothy's papers, I think, out of some reflex to grab the thing that had beaten him, and I simply set my hand flat on the top of it and did not move. I am 68, but I set panels and pulled wire for 31 years, and there is iron in these arms yet. He felt it. He let go. Nothing more happened. Nothing more needed to. Why would you help me, he said, after this? Because accountability is not the same as destruction, I said. I do not want you broken, Greg. I want you back. Those are different things. You are going to answer for this. To Renee. To yourself. To that little girl who thinks she is getting a slanty room. But you are not going to answer for it in the street with nothing. That is not what a father does. Your mother would climb out of the ground. He laughed once, wet and broken, at that. She would, he said. She would bring the shovel herself, I said. That is where the reckoning ended. Not with ruin, with a parking lot and a plan and a door left open the width of a man's foot. The healing did not come fast. It never does. It came in small pieces, the way a house goes up one board at a time, and I will give you the pieces because the pieces are the whole point. In May, my daughter came home. Ellen lives in North Carolina with her husband and their busy life, and I do not see her enough, and that is on both of us. But when she heard what her brother had done, she got in the car and drove 11 hours and walked into my kitchen and put her arms around me and did not let go for a long time. I should have been checking on you, she said into my shoulder. I thought Greg had it handled. Everybody thought Greg had it handled, I said. Greg most of all. She stayed a week. She oiled the pencil marks on the pantry frame, the ones with her name climbing the wood, and she cried a little at the 4-year-old line, and then she laughed at it. We sat on the back step in the evenings, the two of us, and I showed her the handprint her mother left in the concrete, the way I had 1,000 times when she was small, and she pressed her own grown hand next to it and shook her head. How did she know, Ellen said, in 1985? How did she know we'd need the house to remember us? Your mother knew a lot of things she never said out loud, I told her. It was her worst habit and her best one. Dorothy Keegan came by that week, too, with a folder and a jar of the same iced tea she used to bring for Viv. She sat on my porch and went through it one more time, slow, so Ellen could hear it in plain words, and there would never be a day when anyone in my family wondered whether the old man had known what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, Dorothy told Ellen. He read every line out loud to me in his own voice. I have never had a steadier client. She looked at me over her glasses. Vivian would be insufferable about this, you know. She would tell everyone at church she picked out the lawyer. She did pick out the lawyer, I said. She did, Dorothy said, and we let that sit. The three of us, 2 who loved her and 1 who missed her, on a porch I built for exactly this kind of evening. I still go to the second pew on the left on Sundays. For a while after the diner, I had wondered how much the town knew, how the story had traveled. But nobody at church looked at me sideways. If anything, old Purvis, who ushers, gripped my hand a little longer one morning and said, "Good to see you in your regular spot, Lyle." And I understood that some men had heard, and that their way of saying they were glad I had kept my ground was simply to be glad I was still in my seat. A small town keeps more counsel than people think. It just does it quietly, in handshakes. Greg did the slow work. That is the part I am proudest of, and it had nothing to do with me. He told Renee the whole truth of the money, every number, and it was ugly, and they nearly did not make it, and then they did. He met me at the bank in May and sat there red to the ears while a loan officer walked us through what an honest repayment looks like. And I co-signed a plan that was fair and not a penny more. And I made him sign a paper of his own promising Renee she would see every statement. He closed the failing venture. He took a salary job with a builder in the next county, working for another man, which is a hard thing for a proud son, and he did it without complaining, mostly. One evening in June, he called me, not to manage, just to ask, how do you figure a load on an old service panel? Because the builder had put him on a remodel, and he did not want to look green. So I told him. I stood in my kitchen and walked my 41-year-old son through reading a panel over the phone, the way I once walked a 6-year-old through holding a light. And when we hung up, I sat down at the table, and I will not pretend my eyes were dry. There is a particular ache to a child asking you a real question again, after years of telling you that you had nothing left to teach. It is the ache of a door reopening. It does not slam. It just swings back to where it used to hang, on the hinges you set yourself. He is not a finished man. I am not a finished father. But he is learning, again, that the good work happens inside the walls where nobody claps for you, and that a house is not the thing you sell to fix your life. A house is the thing you keep so your life has somewhere to be fixed. He started coming by again, not to manage, to help, the real kind, the kind that asks first. One Saturday in June, he showed up unasked with a bag of galvanized screws and fixed the porch rail that had gone wobbly, the one I had been meaning to get to. He did not make a thing of it. When he left, there was a note folded under the sugar bowl on my kitchen table. A check, a small one, and on the memo line he had written, on account. First of what he owed me, though the plan did not require him to pay me at all. I put it in a drawer. I have not cashed it. Some receipts you keep for what they say, not what they are worth. Nora comes on Saturdays now. She is learning to sand with the grain in the workshop, her tongue stuck out in concentration exactly like her grandmother used to. And she calls the lockbox on my workbench the funny lock, and does not know its story and never will if I have anything to say about it. She still wants the slanty room. I told her the slanty room and the whole house will be hers one day, a long time from now, after I am done rattling around in it. I did not tell her the machinery of trusts and life estates. I told her the house is hers and mine, and her grandmother's, all at once, which is the truer version anyway. Rattling around was her father's phrase, the one he used in the diner to move me out. A big house, rattling around, not safe. I have thought about that phrase a great deal. A house is supposed to have a little rattle in it. That is the sound of a life still moving through the rooms. A silent house is not a safe house. It is just an empty one, waiting for a lockbox. I would rather rattle around in a home I built than sit quiet and cared for in a room with a fish tank and a stranger at the piano. I think at the end, most people would. We just do not always get asked. At the end of June, I poured a new step for the workshop. Small job, a bag of concrete, an afternoon. When it was still wet, I called Nora over. Come here, honey, put your hand right there. Flat. Press down. She did, that small hand in the wet gray, and she looked up at me with Viv's stubborn chin. Why, Grandpa? So the house remembers you, I said, even when you forget yourself. Her handprint is out there now, next to a patch I keep clean, 41 years down the row from her grandmother's. 2 hands, 2 women of that stubborn line, pressed into the same idea. Greg came by that evening and saw it drying and stood over it a long while and did not say anything. Then he crouched down, this grown man in his work clothes, and he looked at his daughter's small hand in the concrete, and I saw him understand, finally, what he had almost sold. Not a house, not a number on a listing. This, the record of us, the thing you cannot put a lockbox on. I'm sorry, Dad, he said, still crouched down there. For all of it. I know you are, I said. Come in. The coffee's on. I only make it for one, but I can stretch it. We sat at the table where a 7-year-old once sold my house out from under me with an orange sun and a green marker, and we drank coffee, and it was not fixed, not all the way. A thing like that does not get fixed all the way. But it was mending. You can feel the difference between a wound and a scar. This had started to be a scar. The house remembered us. That was the whole point. It remembered the young man pulling wire and the woman on the other end of the tape and the boy holding the drop light steady. It remembered all of it, so that on the days we forgot who we were to each other, the walls could hold the memory until we found our way back. I still live there. I will live there until my last day, and then a girl with her grandmother's chin will have it, and no one will ever hang a lockbox on that door again. If you have ever been quietly moved to the edge of your own life by people who called it love, if you have ever sat at your own table and heard your future decided in a voice that meant, well, I hope you will share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Tell me in the comments who taught you the difference between being cared for and being cleared away. I would like to know. Thanks for spending this time with me. And remember, no matter how the people you raised begin to talk over you, it is never too late to choose patience over pride, truth over noise, and the ones who once held the flashlight steady over the ones who only hold the door.